What jobs require a high tolerance for getting yelled at? I've worked in a memory care unit for the past 5 years, and if there's one thing you learn quickly, it's that patience is everything. Alzheimer's takes more than just memories, it takes personalities, emotions, and sometimes even dignity. I remember my first week when a sweet elderly woman, who had greeted me with a smile on Monday, screamed at me on Wednesday, calling me a thief for stealing her purse. It was sitting right on her lap. By the time I found a rhythm, I realized that every day was unpredictable. Some patients forgot who they were, while others forgot where they were. The worst moments were when they remembered something painful and relived it like it was happening for the first time. One man, Mr. Calloway, would wake up in tears, convinced his wife had just died though she had passed decades ago. I had to comfort him daily as if it were the first time. The hardest part wasn't even the yelling, though that was tough. I got called names I wouldn't repeat, had cups of water thrown at me, and even got slapped once. But I knew it wasn't personal. The disease was speaking, not them. What really hurt was watching families struggle. Some visited every day, heartbreak in their eyes as their loved ones failed to recognize them. Others stopped coming entirely, unable to handle the pain. Both reactions were understandable. One of the most heartbreaking cases was Mrs. Patel, a retired teacher with the gentlest smile. On her good days, she recited poetry she once taught to her students, but on bad days, she didn't recognize her own reflection. One morning, she stared at a mirror, screaming at the stranger in her room. I covered the mirror with a towel, held her hand, and told her she was safe. She calmed down, but I could see the fear lingering in her eyes. Despite everything, there were beautiful moments too. Mr. Calloway, who forgot his wife was gone, sometimes spoke about their love like it was brand new. She was the prettiest girl at the dance, he'd say, eyes twinkling. I nodded along, letting him relive it. Even if he'd forgotten many things, his love for her remained untouched. Those were the moments that made the job worth it, glimpses of the person behind the disease. Some days, I went home emotionally drained, questioning how much of myself I could keep giving. But then there were the small victories, when a patient who hadn't spoken in weeks suddenly hummed a song from their childhood, or when one of them squeezed my hand and said, "Thank you," even if they didn't remember why. Those moments reminded me why I stayed, why I endured the yelling and the heartbreak. The reality is, Alzheimer's doesn't just steal memories, it takes everything in its path. But as caregivers, we fight to give back whatever we can, even if it's just a moment of peace. We take the anger, the confusion, the exhaustion, because someone has to. And even when they forget us, we remember them. We carry their stories, their fears, and their joys, holding onto the pieces they can no longer keep. So yes, this job requires a high tolerance for being yelled at. But more than that, it requires a high tolerance for love, the kind that asks for nothing in return, the kind that stays even when memories fade. And that, more than anything, is why I keep showing up, day after day. What jobs require a high tolerance for getting yelled at? Customer support, without a doubt. I've worked in it for 3 years, and if I had $1 for every time I got screamed at, I wouldn't need this job. People call in furious, convinced we personally ruin their day. I've been blamed for broken routers, missed deliveries, and even for the rain. You people are useless. One man yelled once. I wasn't even sure what his problem was. He wouldn't stop cursing long enough to say. One time, a woman insisted we'd stolen her money. I checked her account, and she had signed up for a subscription she forgot about. I would never do that, she shrieked. I sent proof of the sign-up, complete with her IP address. She went silent for a second, then snapped, "Well, you should have reminded me." As if that was somehow my job. No apology, just more yelling. I refunded her anyway. Not worth the fight. The worst calls are the ones where they want something impossible. A man once demanded we deliver a package that was still in another country. "Get it here today, or I'll sue," he threatened. I calmly explained international shipping doesn't work that way. But he wasn't having it. "That's your problem," he barked. I had to pretend I'd escalate the issue, just so he'd hang up. Spoiler, he didn't sue. But it's not just the yelling, it's the emotional whiplash. People go from furious to friendly in seconds. One woman screamed at me for 5 minutes straight, then suddenly sighed, "Sorry, I'm just having a bad day." Another guy ranted about our terrible service, then asked me for restaurant recommendations in his city. It's like dealing with emotional grenades. You never know what you're gonna get. The worst part, we're expected to be nice no matter what. No raising our voice, no sarcasm, just pure professionalism while someone verbally abuses us. I've had customers mock my accent, insult my intelligence, and even tell me to quit my job. "You must be so pathetic to work here," one guy sneered. Yeah, buddy. Nothing screams success like yelling at a stranger over a $5 fee. Still, there are occasional bright spots. Once, I helped an elderly man reset his account, and he was so grateful he called back just to thank me. Another time, a woman told me I was the nicest person she'd spoken to all day. Those moments don't happen often, but when they do, they remind me not everyone is awful. Sometimes people just need a little patience. At the end of the day, you develop a thick skin. You learn to let the anger roll off, to stay calm even when someone is screaming, but it sticks with you. There are nights I replay the worst calls in my head, wondering if I could handle them better. But then I remember half the time, they weren't even mad at me. They were mad at the world, and I was just the unlucky one who picked up the phone. So, if you ever call customer support, remember, we're human too. We don't make the rules, we don't set the prices, and we definitely don't control the weather. We're just trying to help. And trust me, we'd rather not get yelled at either. What jobs require a high tolerance for getting yelled at? Holding the flashlight for your dad, no contest. If you've never stood there, arms aching, while your dad muttered about how they don't make them like they used to, then you haven't known true stress. It didn't matter what he was fixing, cars, pipes, the kitchen sink, if I wasn't holding the flashlight at the exact, impossible angle he wanted. I was bound to get an earful. "What are you doing?" "Trying to blind me." I never understood how he expected me to read his mind. "Hold it steady," he'd bark, as if my trembling arms weren't doing their best. If I adjusted even slightly, he'd groan, "Not there. Right where you had it before." Of course, I had no idea where that was. If I wanted it pointed at the wall, I'd do it myself. He'd grumble. Every adjustment was wrong. Every attempt to help only made things worse. It was a no-win situation. The worst part was when he'd drop something, a screw, a bolt, some tiny piece he swore was crucial, and suddenly, it was my fault. "Where'd it go?" He'd ask like I had psychic powers. I'd shrug, and he'd sigh like I'd personally thrown it into another dimension. "Well, don't just stand there, find it." I'd crawl around, searching, knowing full well if I found it, he'd just mumble, "Took you long enough." And don't even get me started on the sighs. Those long, disappointed exhales that said, "I regret asking you for help," without him having to say a word. Every time I heard one, I knew I had failed him in some mysterious, flashlight-related way. "Why is this so hard?" he'd ask, genuinely baffled, as if I was actively trying to make his life difficult. It was like an unspoken rite of passage. Every son had to go through it. The worst was when he'd start talking to himself, as if I wasn't even there. "Unbelievable. Can't get good help these days," he'd mutter, shaking his head. I was good help. I was trying. But no, apparently. I had failed the sacred art of flashlight holding. And then, the inevitable line. "Just hold it like this," followed by him grabbing my hand and positioning it himself. See? Not so hard, is it? Easy for him to say he wasn't the one standing there like a statue. And yet, as frustrating as it was, there was something weirdly comforting about it. It was a bonding experience, in its own grumpy way. It wasn't about the flashlight, really. It was about spending time together, even if that time involved more yelling than actual fixing. Years later, I caught myself doing the same thing while fixing my car, muttering under my breath, sighing dramatically. The cycle had begun again. Now, I look back and laugh. All those moments that felt like pure frustration were actually some of the best memories I have with my dad. It wasn't about getting it right, it was about being there, being part of the process. Sure, he could have been a little less dramatic about it, but that was just his way. And if I ever have kids, you can bet they'll be standing there, flashlight in hand, getting yelled at too. So yeah, if you want a job that requires an insane tolerance for being yelled at, forget customer service. Just hold a flashlight for your dad. Nothing will ever compare to the pressure, the frustration, or the inevitable, soul-crushing sighs. And yet, somehow, you'll miss it when it's gone. What jobs require a high tolerance for getting yelled at? Retail, hands down. I worked at a clothing store for 2 years, and I swear some customers woke up choosing violence. People would throw fits over sales that ended, clothes that didn't fit, and return policies they never bothered to read. "What do you mean, I need a receipt?" They'd snap, as if basic rules didn't apply to them. No matter how polite I was, I was always the enemy. One time, a woman stormed up to me, furious that we didn't have her size. "You expect me to just buy something else?" she screeched, waving a sweater like it personally insulted her. I apologized, offered to check another store, but she just huffed. "This is ridiculous. Do you even want customers?" I wanted to say, "Not ones like you," but I just smiled and nodded while she ranted about how we used to be better. The worst part, holiday season. Pure chaos. Lines stretching across the store, customers throwing clothes everywhere, and people acting like sales were life or death situations. A man once demanded I give him a discount because the sign was misleading. I showed him the fine print. "That's deceptive," he barked. "You should honor the price." I wasn't in charge of pricing, but that didn't stop him from yelling at me like I was the CEO. And don't even get me started on returns. Some people thought return policy meant whenever I feel like it. A lady once brought back a dress she wore for an event, complete with perfume and wine stains. "I only wore it once," she argued, as if that made it new. I politely explained we couldn't take it back. She exploded. "This is horrible customer service." Right, because refusing to resell her stained dress made me the villain. Then there were the parents who treated the store like a daycare. I'd find kids hiding in clothing racks, knocking over displays, and screaming while their parents ignored them. One MOM let her toddler run wild, pulling shirts of hangers. When I gently asked if she needed help, she rolled her eyes. "Maybe if you had more to entertain kids, he wouldn't be bored. Ma'am, this is a clothing store, not a playground." The entitlement was unreal. People thought being a customer meant they could do anything. One woman made me run back and forth to the stockroom 5 times, then left without buying a thing. "I'll think about it," she said, as if my effort didn't matter. Another threw a tantrum because I wouldn't let her use an expired coupon. "I shop here all the time," she shrieked. "Ma'am, I've never seen you in my life." Despite everything, there were small wins. The rare customer who actually said, "Thank you." The ones who didn't treat me like a servant. One old man came in every week just to chat and buy socks. "You kids work too hard," he'd say, slipping me a candy. Those moments kept me sane. But they were rare, buried under piles of complaints, messes, and customers who thought I controlled the universe. So yeah, retail teaches you patience. It teaches you how to smile while being screamed at. It teaches you that some people will never be happy, no matter what. But most importantly, it teaches you to be kind to retail workers because after working there, you know exactly what they go through. What jobs require a high tolerance for getting yelled at? Teaching, without a doubt. And it's not just the students. Parents, administrators, and even random strangers have opinions on how I should do my job. I teach middle school, which means I spend half my day repeating instructions and the other half trying not to lose my mind. Why do we need to learn this? A kid will groan. "Because I said so," isn't an acceptable answer. But some days, it's all I've got. The worst yelling comes from parents who think their kid is a genius. "Why did my son get a C?" a MOM once demanded. I pulled up his grades missing assignments, half-finished tests, zero effort. "You just don't like him," she snapped, like that explained everything. Another parent accused me of ruining his daughter's chances at Harvard because I wouldn't let her turn in a project 2 weeks late. Apparently, deadlines are optional when you're special. Then there's the admin pressure. Why aren't your students more engaged? My principal asked after a lesson where half the class stared at their phones. I wanted to say, because I'm competing with TikTok, but I just smiled. "We need to see more enthusiasm," she added. Right. I'll just do a backflip next time I explain fractions. I get blamed for things out of my control, but I'm expected to fix them anyway. And students, oh, they yell too. This is so boring. You're the worst teacher ever. Why do we have to do this? They act like I invented school just to ruin their lives. One kid threw a tantrum because I wouldn't let him take a nap in class. Another demanded extra credit after failing a test he didn't study for. "It's not fair," he whined. Right, because I'm the bad guy for expecting basic effort. Parents love to complain, but they don't want to parent. I called one about her son swearing at me, and she sighed. "What do you want me to do about it?" Another told me her daughter refused to do homework because she didn't feel like it. "Can't you just give her a participation grade?" she asked. "Sure, let's just hand out diplomas while we're at it." Apparently, teaching accountability is offensive now. And let's not forget standardized tests. Admin breathes down my neck, parents freak out, and kids couldn't care less. "This doesn't even count for our grade," one boy announced, tossing his pencil down. I watched in horror as half the class followed his lead. Meanwhile, I knew I'd be judged if their scores were low. But sure, let's pretend test results reflect my skills, not the fact that some kids circled random answers. But despite everything, there are moments that make it worth it. Like when a struggling student finally understands a concept, or when a kid who never talks hands me a thank you note. "You're the only teacher who listens," one wrote. Those little victories keep me going, because at the end of the day, I'm not in it for the paycheck, I'm in it for the kids who actually care, even if they're rare. So yeah, teaching requires a ridiculous tolerance for being yelled at. But somehow, I still come back every day, hoping to make a difference. Even if it means dodging complaints, unrealistic expectations, and teenage mood swings. Because for every awful moment, there's one that reminds me why I started. And that's enough. What jobs require a high tolerance for getting yelled at? Scam callers, at least the ones that call me. I imagine they get screamed at all day, but I do my best to make sure I'm the worst part of theirs. When I see an unknown number, I get excited. It's like a free punching bag delivered straight to my phone. "Hello, sir. We are calling about your car's extended warranty," and just like that, my work begins. I start by acting confused. "Wait, which car?" I ask, pretending to be deeply concerned. They hesitate, scrambling for an answer. "Ah, your most recent vehicle," I gasp. "You mean the one that exploded last week?" Silence. I start fake crying. "I knew it. You could have saved it. Why didn't you call sooner?" They either hang up or stammer through my breakdown. Either way, I win. If they push through, I get weirder. I start talking in circles, asking questions like, "But if time isn't linear, wouldn't my warranty be valid in another dimension?" I once convinced a guy I was an undercover government agent tracking scam calls. "Sir, we have your location," I whispered. He panicked, started speaking in another language, and hung up. I like to think I ruined his day. Tech support scams are my favorite. "Your computer has a virus," they say. I act terrified. "Oh no, it's making noises. There's smoke." I start tapping my desk. "Should I pour water on it?" The guy yelled, "No," in pure horror, and I had to mute myself to stop laughing. Another time, I pretended my computer was actually an Etch-a-Sketch. "I don't see a keyboard, just dials," I said. He hung up in frustration. "Some try to scare me. If you don't pay, the IRS will arrest you." I gasp. Can I request a cool cop? Maybe someone named Jake. They ignore me reading their script, but I keep interrupting. "How tall will my cellmate be? Do I get to pick? Will there be snacks?" They eventually hang up, and I cheer. I wasted their time. That's a win in my book. Occasionally, I break character. One guy sighed after 5 minutes of my nonsense and said, "Man, I hate this job. That caught me off guard." "Then quit," I said. "You're better than this," he sighed again. "Pays the bills." He hung up before I could say more. For a second, I almost felt bad. Almost. Then another scammer called, and I went right back to work. It's my free anger outlet. I can be as rude, dramatic, or ridiculous as I want, and I don't feel guilty in the slightest. They're trying to steal from people, ruining their day is the least I can do. Some folks ignore scam calls, but I see them as opportunities. If they waste my time, I'll waste 10 times more of theirs. It's a game I never lose. So yeah, scam callers need a high tolerance for getting yelled at. But if they're calling me, they better have an even higher tolerance for absolute nonsense. Because I have all the time in the world, and I am very, very petty.